friends. We are officially here. Week 0 is upon us. We've talked about the conferences. We've talked about the teams. We've talked about futures, and it's been awesome. But let's be real. We want to talk about real games, and that's what we have. Now, it's not the biggest slate in the world. There are 4 games, but we are going to break down every inch of them. Believe me, StreamYard tried to delay the show. We said no. We did everything we could. Matt Gajewski behind the glass working as the content man, the producer, and everything in between. I am Ben Rasa. This is Betting You. Sir, week 0 is officially here. I know kind of your thoughts, but I want you to say it to the public. Kind of lackluster. I mean, we only got 4 games and 2 have SCS opponents. Like, come on, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I mean, last year we had some awesome showdowns, Jacksonville State and UTEP. I mean, usually we get a UMass and UConn showing.
Oh, yeah.
There's some staples of week 0. We don't have any of those teams. This is just my intuition. I kind of think they're shortening week 0 because these teams, at least the premier ones, are going to be playing longer into the season. My solution to that is you can very clearly make projections even years down the road. You know, if we put UTEP in week 0, is UTEP really a threat to be playing deep into January? I don't think so. So I wish they would increase it to like the 7 games we had last year. I always live by the motto that more football is better, as you know. So I'm very happy that we have football at all, and there's football through all the time slates. But you know me, if I can get the multi-screen going, I'm always going to want that.
I hear that. Listen, it could have been a mid-major, like festival, get all these good mid-majors in there, get these little schools their chance to really shine. But we will take what we've got. We've got 4 games, and we're going to break them down. It's early in the week. We're going to talk about what we got going on Odd Chopper later in the show. Right off the bat, though, please like, subscribe, share this show. We want to run it up this year. It's going to be a great year here at Betting You. It's time to dive into the games, though. We're going to take them in order, and we start in Dublin with Florida State and Georgia Tech, an ACC clash. Georgia Tech last year did this with Louisville, not in terms of being overseas, but starting in conference, and they were very competitive in that game. This spread has bounced around a little bit. You've got Florida State as 11.5 on FanDuel, 55.5 point total. Best game of the day, I think it's pretty clear. But what are the upset chances? And kind of let's just start breaking down Florida State.
Easily the best game of the day. I think through week 0s, as long as they do these international series, we will continue to get at least one premier game. So that's solid. It's early because they are playing overseas. So you kind of get to kick your day off with this before we go into a Hawaii FCS game. But I also think it's the trickiest one to handicap. You're right about the line bouncing all over the place. Some of that due to injuries, and it moved yesterday because Norvell spoke to the media and they will not have their OC for this game. That's not really too much of a surprise. They're sanctioned by the NCAA. And every time we've seen this happen in the past, whether it's been Jim Harbaugh's suspension, Jeff Tedford with medical concerns, most of the time there's not really big changes. And it's not like this is happening mid-season or anything. This is expected. They have time to prepare, get a good game plan for Georgia Tech. So I don't really know why that's moving the line. But if anything, it gives more value to Georgia Tech backers. I guess first and foremost, I want to ask you, do you think that's something that we should really consider? Because I don't really think it is.
No, I don't think so. You mentioned it's not like a sudden news type thing. I don't know how to even quantify that, even if it was, but I think there's more pressing, not even problems, more pressing questions, starting with, DJU at Oregon State, didn't have to do a ton. A power running attack. Is this going to be a different scheme for him? Is Florida State going to look different? Obviously, a lot of those big receivers are not there. I mean, do you expect a balanced team, a defensive team that lost a lot of guys? I mean, how does Florida State just personnel-wise match up?
It's, I think, closer than really it's ever been. So DJU, I think, is certainly a downgrade from Jordan Travis. But he does a lot of the same things Travis does. If you remember, like early in the Jordan Travis days, they had to hide him. He is a player that experienced severe growth over the course of his college career. But he started out as a player that, some people were saying they should move positions with Jordan Travis. And now you get DJU. He has his limitations. I agree that the Oregon State offense really asked him to just game manage. He was 28th in efficiency. That wasn't really the product of what DJU did on his own. It was more the product of they asked him to deliver easy throws. And Oregon State quietly had some good receivers. Silas Bolin's playing at Texas, and another one is bouncing around NFL camps. But at the same time, even with that efficiency, on the other side, Haynes King was 31st in efficiency, so it's 28-31. But Georgia Tech's offense asked Haynes King to do a lot more, and he had to do it with his legs and with his arm. There's OC continuity there. It's the second year under Buster Faulkner for him. And then you just get to the skill position players. I don't think there's a vast gap on offense, and we'll get to defense. Between these two offenses, you lose your starting RB at Florida State. Georgia Tech brings theirs back. And Haynes there, the second Haynes, he was awesome for this team. So I don't really see there being any sort of at least advantage Florida State's way. They're bringing in Roydell Williams from Alabama to transfer. He's not a player I think all that highly of. If you look at wide receiver, I think you could honestly argue that Georgia Tech is better with what they brought back. You lose the NFL receivers from Florida State, but you have Eric Singleton and Malik Rutherford back for Georgia Tech. Those are two awesome players. You also have former transfers like Christian Leary, Chase Lane. Those guys have been in the offense for a long time, whereas Florida State is going to Malik Benson, who I called a failure with Alabama. Realistically, he just underperformed. And then it's some combination of like Jalen Brown, Ja'Kai Douglas. They listed their 5-star second-year player, Hakeem Williams, as a co-backup. So when we broke this down preseason, I kind of thought to reach their ceiling, they would need their 5-star to play like a 5-star. Well, he's not only listed as a backup, he's listed as a co-backup, sharing the spot with Kentron Poitier. So I don't know how Florida State is going to be passing the ball. Offensive line for both teams, I think, is good. Florida State brings back 4 or 5. You have some transfers. They're going to fill that left guard spot with Richie Leonard, who's a transfer coming over from Florida, but you also have TJ Ferguson and some pretty good depth there. But when you parallel that with Georgia Tech's offensive line, they were pretty good as well. They have 5 starters back, and they added Keelan Rutledge to fill the gaps there too. So on the offensive side of the ball, what I'm trying to say is I don't think the gaps are very large between these teams. And I think in certain positions, you could realistically give an edge to Georgia Tech, who started to play much better down the stretch. Now, defense, I think, is a different question. Georgia Tech has a lot of concerns. I think some of these are in the back end. So really this comes down to, can DJU and these bad, unproven, we'll say, Florida State receivers exploit that weakness? Because Georgia Tech is pretty strong up front. They have solid transfers coming in to pair with some pretty good depth. A guy like Sylvain Yanjuan only played 1 game last year on the edge for this team. So yeah, they have some departures, but some of these players are coming back from injury, and I think this is going to be a good unit up front. In the back end, what is this unit going to give us, and does it matter? They have 3 starters back. They also had 3 transfers. They have 1 4-star recruit, so I think that's solid. But you really only had 1 above-average player that returns in this unit, Clayton Powell-Lee. You had pretty good play from Amari Harvey, but he only played in 11 games and only had 408 snaps. So you are really relying on these transfers. I don't know if it's going to be enough. That's really my biggest question, and my hesitation is this Georgia Tech secondary. Because even with the departures from Florida State on defense, this is still a very good unit. To go through a couple guys quickly, they have 4 starters back in the secondary, kind of led by Fentrell Cypress and Shaheem Brown. That's awesome. They lost a ton from their defensive line, but Patrick Payton and Josh Farmer is back. They also add a stud, former 5-star, Marvin Jones Jr. I think they'll be okay on defense. It's the biggest question, I think, what the game kind of comes down to is this DJ Uiagalelei, these bad receivers versus Georgia Tech secondary that is vastly unproven.
55.5 point total. Again, it doesn't scream. It seems pretty methodical pace-wise. You are getting, like I said, you want to shop it, of course, but 11.5 seems to be the consensus number right now. I'm leaning more. It's not my favorite game, but to get it started, I'm leaning more with taking the points. I think this is going to be a pretty competitive game. I was a Georgia Tech backer last year. I really like Haynes King, and I think that Florida State might have some growing pains. It's in a funky location, obviously. What is your position on either a total or a side if you had to give one?
I definitely lean Georgia Tech, and I'm debating playing this. I see some straggling 12s out there.
Okay.
But I guess like one last thing with the defense. So for those of you that like Georgia Tech more than me, and I think there are reasons to like them, they have a new DC. Tyler Santucci comes over from Duke. He was awesome with Duke. And this Georgia Tech team last year, they did some weird stuff, man. They held the DC from the previous regime. I don't know why they did that. New head coach comes in, new OC, but they hold on to the DC and then they fire him mid-season. So why don't you just fire him at the beginning of the season? But anyway, they finally made the right choice. And now they bring in a guy who's been a pretty good DC talent maximizer. And it's not like this team was devoid of talent. We mentioned some of them. You've got Kevin Harris back on the edge. He had a solid year. Jan Juin comes back from injury. That had nothing to do with the former DC. He only played in one game because he was hurt. But then you add Romello Height from USC, Thomas Gore from Miami. Those are two good recruits from elite programs. Defensive tackle, you bring in a Penn State transfer, and you already had some pretty good rotational guys. At linebacker, you bring in Jackson Hamilton from Louisville, EJ Lightsey from Georgia. That's on top of already having two starters back. In your secondary, you have Zachary Tove from Illinois, Warren Burrell from Tennessee. Both those guys have starting experience, as well as Jaden Davis from Cincinnati. So you do have players with talent. There's like some 4-stars here, some transfers that have already played. Can Santucci do a much better job than the Bozo DC last year? And if you think the answer is yes, I do think there's some value on Georgia State. I'm just a little hesitant at this point. I don't know. We'll see if I play it. Or talk me into it, Ben.
I mean, like I said, I think I don't want to say it's parallel to last year because I think that's a stretch on a lot of levels. But I do think that Georgia Tech, when you return some more foundational pieces, when you have a high variance game in week 0, those pieces are more valuable than if this game was in week 6 or week 8 or anything like that. I think there's a lot of questions on Florida State. Talent probably wins out. I'm not really looking. You're getting, there's a plus 340 on the screen right now. Again, if you shop it, you might be able to find even better. But to me, Georgia Tech keeps this respectable. To me, Georgia Tech could hang in this game. And even at 11.5, Georgia Tech is the side that I want. I'm not playing the total. I think the total's about right.
Yeah, it's come up, which I think makes sense.
Yeah.
Georgia Tech plays fairly fast. FSU's around average in terms of pace. And then, I think the main concern we have for the point stuff is like Georgia Tech's defense. But pace should be pretty good. Georgia Tech 45th, Florida State 84th. And remember, this Florida State team lost their quarterback. It tanked their whole season, playoff aspirations, stuff like that. So they passed 50% of the time. That was 49th, 84th in pace. And then they had to hide their quarterback for the last 3 games. So I think those numbers would have been even higher. It's an over a pass if you want to play the total. It's only come up. And then I'm probably going to play Georgia Tech. I'm going to hesitate for now. Well, I guess watch Discord. I think the 12s are okay.
Speaking of that, there's no better time to mention this right off the bat. The exciting news here at OddsSharper, if you haven't seen it, you just go to oddshopper.com. You're going to see a big thing that says Discover Insiders Marketplace. And what it is, it's our team, others as well, putting out content. It's just kind of a way to get more. If you love this show, it's appreciated. But say you want to get these numbers at the jump. Say you want to know who did Matt already hit in week 1. You can find it right in that Discord, right on the OddsShopper app. The links are below. Come in for the week. Check it out. I have my package as well. Just a really, really good time in there. I can't say it enough. So at the very least, take 30 seconds and read what we've got going on in the description. Click those links and see what's up. We'd love to have you inside the ropes. You get us into the individual Discords as well. Just good stuff here at OddsShopper. And for college football season, those numbers matter because they move quickly. A lot of closing line value up for grabs. It is worth the price of admission. Now we're getting somewhere. Montana State and New Mexico. You are solely responsible for what happens here because this game was not on my radar, and now I don't even understand what's going on. This is pushing 10 points the other way. The FCS team is favorite in New Mexico, unless I'm missing something. I don't understand this. I know Montana State is not a team we talk about a lot, but you, of course, know what's going on with them. We've seen them in the playoffs in recent year. What is going on with the spread? I don't understand it.
Yeah, Montana State is a good FCS team. You mentioned they're basically a perennial contender at this point. But last year, they lost 4 games. Take this with a grain of salt because these teams were the top of this FCS division. They lost to South Dakota State by 4, Idaho by 3, Montana, they lost a little bit more, and then South Dakota State, they lost by 1. Outside of those teams, which were all top 9 in the FCS rankings, they basically murdered all their opponents. But still, I believe there's a gap between the top of the FCS and what New Mexico is going to put on the field. So to kind of go to New Mexico, that team is in turmoil, a little bit at least. Sorry?
Yes, it is. They got problems, New Mexico.
But I think they are trying to solve some of these. And, they bring in a complete new coaching staff, which is probably a good thing. This team won 2 games last year. But I think it's a respectable coaching staff. The question is, can they get it done year one? Because you go to Bronco Mendenhall. He had a very successful career at Virginia, of all places, which we hated, or at least I did, hated on them on the ACC pod. That's not an easy place to win. You can't recruit there. Admissions are challenging. And Mendenhall was awesome. Then you go to Jason Beck as OC. I actually like Jason Beck quite a bit. He was with Syracuse last year, which is kind of a disaster situation because they lost their quarterback for part of the year. But he's a QB's coach. That's where he has sort of his background. He was part of that Brennan Armstrong offense in 2021, which was under this Virginia staff. That was the best season Armstrong had. Before that, he worked with Bryce Perkins. He didn't get bad play out of Garrett Schrader. I actually think he kind of maximized his talent at Syracuse. So this is a good OC. On defense, you bring in Nick Howell out of Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is Vanderbilt. We'll see how that is. But anyway, I like this staff. I don't think this is a bad staff that should be a significant underdog to an FCS team, even though it's a respectable FCS team. Now, I guess to get into some of the player personnel stuff, how barren is the cupboard for New Mexico is really the question, because you can't be nearly a 10-point underdog to an FCS team. They bring back Devon Dampier at quarterback. This is a guy that had to play a little bit last year when Dylan Hopkins was hurt. He was dynamic on the ground. He actually finished as the 40th most efficient quarterback. If you extrapolate the sample size out, he didn't have 100 attempts, which is usually where I cut it out. But 5.6 yards per attempt on the ground is awesome. I think this team will use their quarterback on the ground. We've seen Beck do that with previous quarterbacks, mainly Schrader, and he'll play these quarterbacks to maximize their strengths. From there, this team has a lot of transfers, especially in the offensive line. It's completely rebuilt everywhere, only one returning starter, but they bring in some pretty good transfers. You have James Bailey from Texas A&M, Wallace Enumba from FAU, Richard Pierce, East Carolina. And then you have some FCS guys, along with, I didn't even mention Griffin Shearman, Arizona State, or Tevin Shaw, Houston. They have 8 transfers on the offensive line. All these players are a little better recruited than what Montana State has. And then the rest of the team, it's kind of the same way across the board. Isaiah Jones from Syracuse comes in at receiver. He has familiarity with Beck in this offense. Sean Miller from Illinois. These are players that were in the Power 5 last year. I just think as a whole, offensively, they're more talented than what you're going to see on the Montana State side. Eli Sanders from Iowa State. On defense, it's kind of the same thing. This team has a fair amount of returning production. It's not great, not bad, but then they backfill every other spot with transfers. This team has 14 transfers on defense, and some of them come from pretty decent programs. Like Ish Burdines from TCU. He's a safety. You have Nigel Williams from Northwestern, Dominic Tatum, Washington, Javante Royal, Pittsburgh, Noah Avenger, San Diego State. He has some experience. Cameron Watts, Texas Tech. I'll stop there. You kind of get the point. Where are these programs coming from? They're coming from Power 5 places on this New Mexico team. It's definitely a big ask for Mendenhall to get it all together for week 0, but he's a good coach, and if anyone's going to do it, it's him. You look over to the Montana State roster. I mean, this team had some good players last year. You don't end up, like top 10 in the FCS and not have good players, but they lost a lot of them, and some of them are transfers to good programs. On their offensive line, especially, like Rush Reimer's now at Cal, and you have Omarion Igbedion at Baylor now. How do you backfill these players? Well, you're kind of just standing on recruits because they don't have a lot of incoming transfers themselves. They have one North Texas guy who has no experience and one on the defensive line from Washington State. Otherwise, we're talking about horrific transfers. So I think they did lose quite a bit of talent that they didn't backfill quite as well as they should have. You do have some players back that are quality. They have their quarterback back. He was elite in the FCS. One of your tackles was elite. The other one was average. Your center's back. Receiver, you have a Colorado State transfer in Ty McCullough. Your running back is Julius Davis, formerly of Wisconsin. So there is talent here, but there are holes on the offensive line that's going to be facing off against, a Power 5, basically down transfer defensive line from New Mexico State. And it's kind of the same thing on defense. You lose a lot of your best players for this Montana State team. I just don't think they have the talent to stand up to all the guys that are coming down to New Mexico. And even if you think it's even, this is still a value on the New Mexico side. So I'm playing this. I already played a +9. The way it's moving in the market, I don't know. Maybe you should just wait. What's your read on this game? Because I'm kind of baffled.
Well, so yeah, I mean, now I'm I had no read on this game, and now I'm baffled because I dug into it. The only thing that I'm saying is that I'm waiting. I think it's going to hit 10, and the minute it does, I'm just going to bet it. Like, it's about to. 9.5 is -120 on the screen. If I can get 10, and I'm sure I could probably go and shop it right now, and I'm going to do that right after the show. Find 10 at -110 or so. I'm going to do that just because I'm not going to say on principle. I mean, there are certainly, if you put South Dakota State up against like Louisiana Monroe or Temple, I certainly get why they might be favored. But this is not a 2-point spread. This is over a touchdown on the road. And Montana State, I watch a decent amount of FCS football. Montana State's a good team. They're not the North Dakota State triple dynasties either. They're a solid perennial playoff team in the FCS. New Mexico, I mean, they weren't good last year. They won a handful of games. They were competitive at times. Do you have any interest in getting like 3-1 on the money line?
Yeah. New Mexico won 4 games. They shouldn't have won them all, but
they had a Tennessee directional school in there. I got to bring up this.
Well, they beat Fresno State, who Mikey Keene got hurt in the game. They beat UMass. They beat Tennessee Tech, and then Hawaii was probably their only reasonable win. I think I said they had 2 games earlier. That was mainly a joke. They won 4, but they still fired their coach. Oh, last thing. I think this New Mexico team is going to be pretty run heavy with Dampier, and Eli Sanders might be their best offensive player. He's the Iowa State transfer at running back. And again, they have 8, I'm not kidding, 10 transfers on the offensive line, most of them from Power 5 programs. Some combination of that should be halfway decent. I think the biggest weakness on this Montana State defense is their defensive line. They only have 2 starters back. They returned like every starter from, or at least players with starting experience from their back 7. Their defensive line is where you have the biggest concerns with this team. So I think you should be able to run on them with New Mexico. I guess the only other thing to mention here is I'm halfway interested in an under too. Montana State only passed the ball 33% of the time. This team runs a lot of like heavy 12 personnel sets, 60 plays per game. They weren't super fast. Most of that is just the product of they crushed a couple teams on their schedule, so they got off more plays. I'm somewhat interested in an under just because you're going to see 2 run-heavy teams clashing against each other, probably playing pretty slow. But I don't know. There's definitely defensive concerns where I'm hesitant. Like maybe you see some explosives on the ground that ruin this, but I'm debating an under 2.
It's going to be a fascinating game, no doubt, but we are in lockstep there. Now we get to the big spreads. We get some mismatches, you could say, starting with SMU and Nevada. Now, these are both, real schools, but Nevada is in the running for maybe the worst team out there. I think I was talking about this last night in Discord. Again, you can always hop in there. What do you think? Just gut feel. If Nevada and New Mexico played on a neutral field, what do you think that line is?
I can actually do it for you pretty quick.
Yeah, do it. To me, Nevada is I personally, not that I dug into the Mountain West that deeply. I have Nevada below them.
Me too. I have this as like, depending on where, do they play this year? I could probably just do this for where they play. But anyway, I have it about 2.5, 3 points in favor of New Mexico on a neutral field.
Yeah, that's where I would have it. I agree. Just shows times are tough here. And, we're talking about Montana State. Now we switch gears. How about SMU coming to town. Sure, you're at home, but good luck. I bet when we talked about our preview shows, I sprinkled on SMU to make the playoff. I think that this team is extremely dangerous. And I think we both think that they are going to have a field day against Nevada, who has nothing to put on the field.
I think that's the case. So it comes down to, is this enough points? Do we think just what do they show in this game? These are some things that I typically don't like to get into, but it's week 0. We have limited options. Fortunately, I don't think you're seeing that much of a look ahead spot because SMU plays Houston Christian in week 2. So they should not really be looking ahead there. Nevada plays Troy. I do have a lot of interest actually in betting Nevada in that game. I guess a little look ahead. I think Nevada gets spanked here, so you probably get a better number if you wait on that. Player personnel-wise, SMU is one of the most talented rosters immediately in their first year in the ACC. They dominated the AA seed last year. And some people will probably look to scores against Oklahoma, TCU. They were 28-11, 34-17. They hung in those games a lot closer than those scores indicate. SMU actually had more yards than Oklahoma. They did run a few more plays, so yards per play was almost dead even. It was the same thing against TCU. So they already showed the ability to hang with these good teams. Now you're going back down and you're facing one of the bottom feeders in the Mountain West. You have 2 quarterbacks that are capable signal callers here. They're calling this a quarterback battle. I don't think that's actually the case, but I don't know if I really care that much. They kept Kevin Jennings, which was a huge surprise. This guy played quite a bit last year when Stone went down. He was the 53rd most efficient quarterback in the country. Only had 3 turnover-worthy plays, nearly 4 yards per carry. Now, he had a great cast of skill position players around him. We'll get there. But I can't believe that they retained this guy. There are Power 5, Power 4 teams, good, like in better conferences, Big Ten and SEC, where this guy could start immediately. This guy could play. I mean, we're talking about guys like Diego Pavia playing at Vanderbilt, Taylon Green playing at Arkansas. Kevin Jennings showed more than either of those guys. Rutgers, Maryland, and Minnesota are trotting out a bunch of crap at quarterback. The fact that they kept him is shocking. And what I'm trying to say is, even if they pound at Nevada and Preston Stone starts, I don't know if back doors are going to be open because of how deep this team is. Legitimate backups at every position. You go 4 deep at running back with Knight and Johnson, Wheaton, 4-star freshman, and McFall. They have 6 receivers back who were legitimate producers, and they're all back. You also had 2 transfers in Ashton Kozar, Brashard Smith. Your tight end, RJ Maryland's back. You have 4 starters back from a good offensive line, but you added 6 transfers. Like, those guys want to play. They didn't just transfer to SMU to sit on the bench. So even if you see a routing, which you should, this, I think, is how it's going to look, where these players that are trying to earn playing time are actually going to go out there and try to show something. Defense, it's the same thing. 10 starters are back, and you bring in some high-quality transfers like Jafari Harvey from Miami, Deuce Harmon from Texas A&M. Then you look at Nevada's roster. I mean, what a mess. They have a completely new coaching staff. Jeff Choate comes in. His I guess, specialty is defense. He was a former Texas co-DC. Mike Lynch comes in as OC. He's a running backs coach for the last 5 years. And they bring in Boise State's co-DC to be their DC. Boise State had a terrible defense last year. So I don't think you're starting from at least a proven coaching base. That's a concern for me in game 1 of this team. Brendan Lewis is still your quarterback. This guy was pretty bad in this conference last year. He was the 150th most efficient quarterback among 178 qualifiers that had 178 pass attempts. Or 100 pass attempts, excuse me. 2 starters back on the O-line. You could maybe argue this is a good thing because they were 121st in pass blocking, 92nd in run blocking. They do bring in some transfers, but most of these players are inexperienced. I will say they do come from pretty good programs. Lovell from Kansas, Amama from Virginia, Lopez, Oregon State, Seth from Washington. We'll see. Patchwork O-line. I like where the transfers are from, but that's still only 4. You have to start at least 1 player who was horrible last year, and that's assuming the transfers play well. Their top running back, Sean Dollars, averaged 3.5 yards per carry. Your receiving core is, and Pat Garwo is still hurt. He had a season-ending injury last year. He's not practicing. Your receivers are completely unproven. They released a depth chart. They're starting a Jaden Smith character who I didn't even have projected to be a contributor. Cortez Braham comes in from West Virginia. He's been getting some hype. I mean, he's not a West Virginia guy. He's a JUCO guy who transferred to West Virginia. West Virginia was his only Power 5 offer, and then he couldn't get on the field. So, I mean, like, how good is Cortez Braham? I'm happy to see he's dicing up this terrible Nevada defense in camp. But, I mean, this is a JUCO guy who's now trying to play real college football. So I don't like anything on their offense. Not one position, maybe the offensive line. I'm not sure they can run the ball anyway. And then on defense, this team has, like, Davis Mallinger got arrested for he was probably going to be your best player in the secondary. He has felony drug charges. Jackson LeDuc, he retired medically. He's one of your starting linebackers. You're starting a JUCO defensive tackle more than likely. A couple transfers I think are decent, like Keyshawn Cobb from West Virginia, Keaton Crawford. But, I mean, they're already down guys. And one last thing, I listened to the press conference from Cho-8 from their scrimmage. They lost one starter. He would not reveal who it was, but, like, there's going to be a contributor who's, like, out for significant time, maybe out for the year. He just wouldn't say who because some of these coaches like to do this stupid gamesmanship thing. So who knows who this player is, but they're definitely missing an additional starter who hasn't been named, and they've already named a few. Oh, also, Chuba Purdy, their transfer from Nebraska, who was supposed to maybe beat out Brandon Lewis, still hasn't been throwing the ball. He's been hurt the entire offseason, so they don't have, like, much depth at quarterback either. I don't know. I think this team's a disaster.
Well, I didn't know they even had Chuba Purdy, who former Iowa State great. Anyway,
I wonder who this hurt mystery player is.
I'm not sure it really matters against SMU, to be honest. They should be just for context. Not that this means much, but I was just talking about, if you're at home against an FCS school, you really should be able to handle it. They played Idaho last year, 33-6. They lost. Not great for Nevada. They played USC to open their season last year, 66-14. Would it shock you to see SMU hang 50+ points here?
No, absolutely not.
I kind of like the over for that reason, though. Do you have any interest in the over? Because I think that SMU hangs 45+ points. Can Nevada get to 10?
It depends. Like, I would say probably no. So
that's just sad.
Well, I mean, I think you could probably find their team totals should be like 14.5 based on their implied odds. It's a 27.5 point spread currently, 57 total. I think, if you're going to play like a big week 0 card, I know a lot of you do, some secondary bets to look at. Nevada under team total, if that's like 14.5. The backups for this team are good. SMU built a ton of depth in the portal, a ton of it. This team has awesome NIL resources. They're at the top of the ACC in terms of what they can spend NIL-wise. They're harder to recruit still because, first year in the ACC. They have money to spend, and it shows. Like, Miami transfers, this is a good team. The depth, I think, is what really does it for me. Once your backups come in or you're rotating, there's not much of a drop-off. There is a drop-off, but this is not drastic. I don't know how Nevada is going to do scoring the ball outside of self-inflicted wounds from SMU.
You can't wait to see it. I'm certainly with you very high on the old Mustangs this year. All right, we got one game left. Again, I want to mention once again, if you have any questions, because we're breezing through this, stuff's going to happen. Matt_Gajewski on Twitter, at JazzRazBets on Twitter. We're there. We're available. And of course, we are inside the ropes at OddsShopper. Those links are worth their weight in gold. It's a great time of the year, our favorite time of the year. A lot of value on these boards. And with breaking news all the time, players out, and you want to stay on top of it because the lines are going to move very, very quickly. Now we get to my favorite game, the game that I'm most excited to talk about, no joke. And it's Delaware State and Hawaii, 38.5, 55.5 point total. I was looking back, and Hawaii has played some absolute clown schools in recent years, and honestly, they're very competitive. I'm a big Albany guy, so don't take any shots at me, former Great Danes alumni, but they struggle with them. They played Duquesne in recent years, not great. This is a different level, though. Obviously, when you're laying this many touchdowns, you're talking about 5-6 touchdowns. it's a name your score situation. But I'll take the lead on this one. Delaware State is so bad that it supersedes anything else that I think we could put out there. They are as bad as any football team anywhere. Period. They're that bad.
They went 1-10 last year.
They lost to Bowie State. Well, I don't even know. I genuinely don't know what that is.
They lost to Army 57-0. They scored 14 or fewer points 7 times.
Miami of Ohio beat them by like 52.
Yeah, this team is a disaster. They have coaching continuity. So I don't know. Maybe that means something. They passed 46% of the time. They ran 49.5 plays per game. You know, like sometimes pace can be dictated by how bad you're getting crushed in games. They were definitely a team that was getting crushed often. They bring a lot back in terms of who's coming onto the field. So I guess that's positive. Your best skills are on the defensive line. On defense, you have like one good edge and one defensive tackle at the FCS level. The rest of this team was a disaster. Your secondary is a big concern. What's Hawaii doing? They're running the run and shoot, air raid style offense, four wide every single play. What is this Delaware State team doing on offense? You know, you bring back your quarterback. He was below average at the FCS level in terms of efficiency. You lost one of your tackles and your top receiver. I truly don't think any of this matters because this team is terrible. They didn't do anything in the transfer portal. They actually lost a guy. I didn't find anyone transferring down to this team from Power 5 or G5. So, like, they're a complete unknown in terms of talent. What you really can just go on is their stats from the FCS level, and they're very bad. And there weren't a ton of major injuries for this team. There were definitely some, but I mean, like, these players that came in were bad. The ones that left were bad. I don't have a lot to say about this team. I guess if you want to get into specific personnel groupings, we can. But we can also just save time or maybe talk about Hawaii. Generally speaking, I am of the belief that it's very hard to quantify motivation. Hawaii is playing one of the worst FCS teams in existence, and then they have UCLA week 2. So as far as look-ahead spots go, this is about as concrete as it gets. How much is it worth? I'm not sure. The coaching staff has already talked about wanting to prepare for UCLA, which I think makes some sense. They're breaking in some new players and some depth, especially. They named a freshman or a redshirt freshman, I forget, their backup quarterback, John Kiwi Sagapolutelli. I don't know who he is. He was a surprise backup to me, but he's young. They probably want to get some reps with him. Otherwise, I don't know if Stephen McBride is going to be playing in this game. He's rejoining the team, but his false status in terms of playing games is uncertain after his legal troubles. Who knows? You have 2 offensive linemen that are new, 3 back. That unit should be pretty good. You do replace 5 starters in your front 7 on defense. You bring in some transfers there, so that should be okay. But I just, like, how long are these guys going to play? What is Hawaii going to show from this offense? These are true questions I like. Do we see players that are, like, Hawaii doesn't have fantastic beat reporting. It's decent. But we don't really know who's super banged up for this team. Do guys just sit out? I mean, I don't think you can bet this game because of some of those things. Maybe you just wait till kickoff and see who's warming up, who's not. And I don't think you can back Delaware State right now. You know, like, if you want to play a Delaware State line, just wait till Hawaii goes up 7-0 and bet it live. So I don't think there's an actionable play here. Much more interested in Hawaii's week 2 game than this disaster of a nightcap we have for week 0.
I'm betting this game. I'm doing it. I'm betting Hawaii.
Okay,
I don't care.
Who are you taking?
I'm taking Hawaii. I think this should be like.
What's your angle? Like first half?
My angle is that they legitimately I think they're, again, you mentioned trying to quantify like motivation in this stuff is a dangerous game. I couldn't agree more. I think with Timmy Chang, this is the first year I think Hawaii has some real expectations, and I wouldn't be stunned to see them really want to start with some enthusiasm, and their backups could score on this team. And I honestly think
that is true. It's the SMU thing.
Yeah, it's the SMU. So like, I'm not super worried about like if they, you know, McBride, all these guys. I think that there is some incentive not to to be dynamic, to run a very vanilla offense, but let them go. And I think if they do let them go, Hawaii can absolutely get to 50 or 60 points on their own if they want to.
Okay, so I just looked at depth. They have 19 of their top 25 defenders in terms of snaps back. So most of these guys aren't bad. They're like average players on their snaps. You know, like sometimes these guys are getting in at the end of games when they're getting killed against backups and stuff. So these rotational players are hard to quantify their efficiency. But I mean, these are like reasonable players, and there's a lot of experience back among the backups, which is what I was trying to look at quickly. Because at first I kind of just wrote this game off as I wasn't going to bet it. But I don't know. You're kind of making some sense to me, Ben. They have a ton of returning production, especially among their two deep, which when you're going to kill a team like this, two deep production is as important as it gets. I don't know. You might be talking. What is the first half line on this?
So that's a good
That
question.
might not be out. Some of these lines like dropped within the day.
Yeah, that might not be out. Let's see. Yeah, it's not out yet.
So this team lost to Army by 57 points, who plays, obviously they're super slow. You let Army, a service academy running the triple option, give up or score 57 points on you. Like Army's game is paper cut you to death, not explosives. And plus, Hawaii's rushing attack's not bad. Tylen Hines was hurt all last year. The guy averaged like 7.5 yards per carry in 2022. Plus, you had Cam Barfield, so they're much deeper than they have been.
They gave up almost. This is actually insane. I don't even know how this is possible. They gave up almost 300 yards passing to Army in that game. That's literally impossible. Army doesn't throw. So I don't even know what that means because Army runs the triple option. They also gave up 300 yards on the ground. They played Miami of Ohio. They lost 62-20. Miami of Ohio had 470 yards rushing in that game. Like, these are numbers that, again, I think that if Hawaii, they've got bigger things going on, like UCLA, no doubt about it. It's not inconceivable to me that Hawaii says, let's start. The last couple of years, they've played real teams, and it has not been a good start for them. There's been full rebuilds. The team was a mess after what was that guy's name from Arizona State? Todd Graham? Is that him? Remember they had a coach, and there was like a mass exodus from Hawaii. I think.
And
yeah,
like Rolovich.
What?
And like Rolovich before that.
Yeah. They had some players. It was a full rebuild. This is the first year Hawaii comes in with some stability, and I really think that does matter. And you couldn't draw. This is not Montana State. This is not, honestly, like New Hampshire, North Carolina. Like it could be North Carolina A&T style, but Delaware State is rough, and they've shown no ability to stop anybody. I think Hawaii falls their way into 50-ish points, and that's going to be enough.
Yeah, I actually lied. It was 18 of their top 23 back on defense, 17 of their top 22 on offense. That's in terms of snaps. So, yeah, I mean, Hawaii had to build this from the ground up. This is what, year 3 of Timmy Chang, I believe.
Yep.
So they're sending it. The recruiting classes, they've been able to build. They're finally starting to pay off. When you have that kind of depth on your team, Hawaii only gets a shot like this like once every 3 years to reach your bowl. So
that's what I mean. Like,
this is it.
This is, I really don't, and in past years, they've struggled with these type of teams. This is a dream spot to let it go. If you're ever going to do it, it would be right here to hang 60 or 70 points.
All right, I'm going to do it.
I also think, and again, predicting this is a fool's errand. Check back, and again, when you're in Discord, when you sign up, come back, hop in my channel. I think this is going to push 42 by kickoff. I think money will come in on Hawaii when people realize what the hell's going on here.
Yeah, you've made me realize a little more, I think.
Come on in. The water's warm again. It's just 4 games this week. Week 1, we're going to be doing betting you overtime. We're going to be dropping all sorts of content here on the Odd Chopper channel. If you have any suggestions, anything that you want to see, you guys know where to find us. But 4 up and 4 down. Last thing before we bounce on out of here, if you had one bet on the board, what is your favorite of all of these plays that we talked about?
My favorite plays, this is dangerous, but I think it's New Mexico.
Oh, yeah.
I think a +9.5 is fine. I think your approach, if you're scared of this moving, and who knows, this could bounce any direction. It's an FBS, FCS team.
Definitely.
You might get a 10 if you wait. I'm not 100% sure. But also, if you want to just wait and then sprinkle money line stuff, I think that's live here too. My second play is SMU. I took a -26. I think as long as you get this below 4 touchdowns, I'm okay with that. Those are my top two.
Yeah, I'm with you on both, and I don't care. I'm riding with the Y into the death train. We are just going for it. I will lay my 38.5 points. And we'll see. Again, that's some late night. You've had some drinks, a little midnight madness for the Rainbow Warriors. But you know what? 4 up and 4 down again. Everyone, we couldn't be more excited to be talking about real matchups, real football. And the games kick off soon enough. So on that note, we're gonna bounce on out of here. Me, Mr. Gajewski, and everyone here at Odd Chopper. Thanks again for tuning in. Check those links below. Come back next week as we dive into a loaded week 1 slate.